All right, we're about to dive into a battlefield that you can't see on any map. It's the place where the most critical wars are actually won and lost, and that's inside the mind of a soldier. Get this, after just 3 days with little sleep, 50% of soldiers become unfit for combat. I mean, just let that sink in for a second. That is a powerful and honestly a pretty terrifying statement. Hello to all viewers of my channel. You know that stark reality? It comes straight from the manual Psychology of Combat, and it just perfectly sets the stage for what we're about to get into. We are going deep, deep into that invisible battle that's raging inside every single soldier's mind. See, in modern warfare, the biggest, toughest challenge, it's not always the enemy you can see down the sights. Nope. It's the psychological toll, the sheer weight of the fight itself. That's the real war. So, what are we really talking about here? Well, there's a whole field for this, and it's called combat psychology. You can think of it as the science of mental warfare. It's all about understanding how the insane pressures of combat affect a soldier's mind, and maybe even more importantly, how to build the tools to keep that mind sharp and fighting fit. So in this analysis, we're going to tackle this thing head on. First, we'll look at the two biggest enemies of a soldier's mind: sleep deprivation, that relentless assault, and the crushing weight of extreme stress. And then we're going to see the psychological armor they use to fight back. All right, let's start with an enemy that is totally silent, but it is absolutely devastating. I'm talking about the war against sleep. It's such a fundamental resource, but it's almost always the first casualty in any conflict. So let me ask you this directly. How critical do you think sleep really is in a combat zone? Is it just a nice to have, a luxury, or is it as vital as, say, ammunition? Well, let's just look at the data. Okay, so this is the raw data, and wow, the numbers are just stark. As you look down this table, you see this direct, undeniable link between the hours of sleep a soldier gets and how long they can actually stay effective. I mean, look at this. With 0 hours of sleep, they're basically unfit for combat in just 3 to 4 days. It's an incredibly steep and rapid decline. And this chart, this just visualizes that data in a way that is absolutely staggering. A soldier getting just 3 hours of sleep a night can maybe stay combat ready for about 9 days. But get this, look what happens when you bump that up to 5 hours. Just 2 extra hours of sleep, and it extends their effectiveness to 90 days. That's a tenfold increase. We're not just talking about feeling a little less tired here. This is a fundamental shift in their ability to operate. So at the end of the day, it all boils down to a hard limit. The research is clear: 4 hours. That is the absolute bare minimum a soldier needs per day just to function. Anything less than that, and you're not just tired, you are actively degrading your ability to fight, to think clearly, and ultimately to survive. Okay, so we've seen what a lack of sleep does. Now, let's layer on top of that the second major psychological enemy: the constant, crushing weight of combat stress. You know, stress in a combat zone it's just everywhere. It's pervasive. It feels like it's in the very air you breathe. And it doesn't just start when the fighting begins. No, it starts way before that, on the flight in, during all the prep, and all that endless waiting. It comes at you from every single direction, all the time. And here's the thing, stress isn't just one feeling. It's actually a whole collection of different factors. This table is absolutely fascinating. It breaks down the psychological impact of different weapons. It's comparing a mortar to an 85mm cannon, looking at things like the element of surprise, the noise level, and how protected a soldier feels. It really shows how different threats create totally different kinds of psychological pressure. So it's so important to get this. Stress isn't just about being afraid of the enemy. It's really a full-on assault on all the senses. It's the constant noise, the shock of surprise, that deep gnawing uncertainty of what's coming next, and just the harshness of the physical environment. All of it works together to grind down the mind. Okay, so the mind is under attack from lack of sleep and this massive onslaught of stress. The big question then becomes, how do you fight back? This is where combat psychology really shines, moving from just diagnosing the problem to finding the solution. So let's look at the tools in their toolkit. Well, the first step in any battle is you got to know your enemy, right? So commanders and soldiers are trained to spot the early warning signs of severe combat stress. We're talking about things like excessive anxiety, becoming super irritable, maybe some impulsive or reckless behavior, and even physical stuff like a tremor or suddenly smoking a lot more. And this is brilliant. This shows the next step, the countermeasures.
And this isn't just guesswork, it's a very systematic approach. They deploy specific psychological tools to fight specific symptoms. So if you're dealing with excessive anxiety, you might use things like targeted relaxation or meditation. For something like increased irritability, a soldier might use what's called self-suggestion, which is basically reinforcing positive commands to yourself to stay in control. It's a whole toolkit for the mind. So when you boil it all down, building this mental armor is a pretty clear 3-step process. 1, recognize the symptoms, both in yourself and in your buddies. 2, apply these targeted psychological methods to push back against them. And 3, and this is so key, it is not a one-time fix. It's a process of continuous maintenance. It's just like going to the gym for your body, but this is for your mind. And that really brings us to the core takeaway of this whole thing. At the end of the day, the most powerful, most decisive weapon on any modern battlefield, it's not a rifle, it's not a tank, it's not a drone. It is a resilient, prepared, and well-trained human mind. And I want to leave you with this final thought to chew on. If the human mind can be trained to withstand the absolute extremes of combat, what does that say about the untapped potential for resilience that's inside all of us, in our own daily lives, just waiting to be unlocked? Subscribe to the channel and like, and also suggest your topics for future videos in the comments.